Welcome to our training. It's a great day. And my name is Isaac. I am your trainer today. And I'm one of the Dynamo certified trainers here at Dynamo Methods, based here in Kansas City. Today, we have a very interesting topic, which is not necessarily a new topic, but I believe it's going to be intriguing to most of you, if not all of you. It's something that I believe is relevant to all of us. If you've ever been in a position of leadership or being led by someone, most of us have been led by someone at some point in time, or you have a leadership role in whichever capacity, this is going to be relevant to you. Again, welcome to the training, and it's going to be fun. So, with these trainings that we do every Thursday, we usually takes about 45 minutes, 50, sometimes an hour. It all depends, but we usually have time allotted for these trainings. Is usually 1 hour. So today we're going to talk about how to shift from being a traditional manager, and by traditional I mean being a regular manager in the traditional sense. If you've ever gone through any management training, probably more than 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you're like me, there's some management principles that have been taught over the years. Some of them still apply, but again, the world has changed today. Talking about 2026, the principles are still the same, but the approach has changed. People have changed in terms of how they view things, how we approach things, how we perceive situations, how we digest information. Today, we are in the age of AI, which means you have access to information and you can get it as fast as possible, really, more than ever before. But beyond that, we're also becoming very impatient as human beings because, again, the world is changing very fast. So, as we try to adjust to the pace and the speed at which things are moving, one thing we should not forget is that we are still responsible as leaders to make sure our people feel like they belong, to make sure we create and build a good working environment for our people. And that's why today we want to talk about how to shift from a manager to becoming a multiplier. And some of you know that I published my fifth book last month in May of 2026. And the book is called The Multiplier Leader, How Great Leaders Multiply People, Purpose, and Impact. And I've shared before that it took me about a little bit over 2 years to write the book because I really wanted to make sure it's a good product out there. But beyond that, I wanted that book to be a tool that's going to make a difference. And the whole premise of the book is how can you transform from being a regular leader to becoming a multiplier leader, someone who doesn't have to be the most essential person in a team. And there's value for that, but the goal is to get you to shift from being a manager and a leader who is dependent on all the time to becoming someone who can develop and grow other leaders that will be able to take care of the stuff that need to be taken care of. I'll be giving you some information, and actually, if you want to go to Amazon, you can find the book there. But here in about a week or so, you'll be able to buy that book from our website, which is very exciting. So let's get to the training. You know what? I forgot to show you the book. That's how the book looks like. The Multiplier Leader, How Great Leaders Multiply People, Purpose, and Impact. You can find it on Amazon, and very soon you'll be able to buy from our website and also from other bookstores, wherever you get your books. So, jumping right into the training, how to shift from a manager to becoming a multiplier, and why good and to an extent great managers still create dependency within their team, create dependency within their organizations, and why your best manager might be quietly limiting your organization's growth. Your best manager might be, to an extent, crippling your ability to move at a steady pace, whichever speed you want to move at, to move towards your goals. And that's a kind of like an unfortunate thing where your best employee can become the limiting force when it comes to your growth. And I'll break it down here in a second. Just about an hour ago, I met with a senior leader in a really large multinational organization, and we are talking about over 1,000 locations. But we were discussing about his team in that operates from the headquarters here in Kansas City. And it was exactly the same subject we are discussing about today. So the person has a senior leader who is in charge of everything operations. And the leader is really good at what they do. They're they have it down when it comes to operations, the technical side, how to do something, when it's supposed to be done, the results that are expected. But where they are struggling is getting to delegate, is getting to let go, is even having a system in place and a recipe on how things are supposed to be done. Now, lucky enough, they have people that have been working in that organization, specifically that particular team, for years and years. The main leader shared with me that they have someone who has been there for over 40 years and they're just about to retire. So the company has a track record of very high level of in terms of retention. But in this particular team, this particular leader is struggling to just be a leader, because when you are so much absorbed in the day to day, in this case, approving everything, making all the major decisions, being the answer man or the answer woman, that's likely to cripple you, but also cripple the team as well. So this conversation is not a made up conversation. It's very timely. And I can tell you a story after story, not from a month ago, not even from 2 weeks ago, from just this week. This is what I do for a living: executive coaching, training, speaking, having these conversations with even people that are not our clients. So I know this conversation is very timely, and I'm glad we are having this training today. So most organizations have at least one manager or one leader whom everyone seems to depend on. This particular leader is likely to be highly experienced. They are reliable. They are knowledgeable. They know what needs to be done, when it's supposed to be done, how it's supposed to be done. They solve problems quickly. Most of the leaders in, and especially high pressure situations, are usually good at thinking on their feet. So they can solve problems very quickly. And that could be as a result of them having a lot of experience doing something that they have done for so long, or they just have a natural knack for solving problems. These leaders tend to be trusted by their people, especially if they have been working with their people for a long time. They have a track record of delivering results. Employees admire them. But when something goes wrong, everyone knows exactly who to call. They call this one particular leader. And at first, it seems like leadership success, and it can be considered to be leadership success. But over time, something interesting begins to happen. And you might have experienced this as well. The team becomes increasingly dependent on this one leader. They become increasingly dependent on this manager. Questions get to flow upward from the team to this particular manager. Decisions flow upwards. Problems flow upward. My mentor, John Maxwell, wrote a book called Developing the Leaders Around You. And there's actually another book which is also very much close to that one, also written by John Maxwell. It is called The Leader's Greatest Return. And in both books, he talks about problems on leaders' desk, and he says that there's no single day where you're not going to have problems on your desk as a leader, and problems in the context of something that you need to take care of, a decision you need to make, and even sometimes literally problems that you need to solve. So when you have an employee and a leader who is good at solving problems, all these problems are likely to flow upward from the team to that particular person. Complexity is likely to solve upward. Again, in 2026, the world is moving so fast, but at the same time, organizations are striving to improve on their performance. Just 2 days ago, I had a conversation with one of my executive coaching clients. And what he shared with me is that him and another team of senior leaders in the organization are getting together every 2 weeks. And one of the things they are looking into is increasing revenue per full-time employee. It's a metric that for-profit companies, most of them get to measure and track. So they are looking into that, and he gave me a number. This is where we are at. This is where we want to be. And he said, when we started discussing about this, somehow it turned out that the situation is more complex for some of our senior leaders. Some of the people have gone through that. They have experienced having that kind of a decision. Others have never done it before. Some have tried it before, and this was the key thing. Some have tried it before and it didn't work according to them. And so they are a little bit skeptical and they are pushing back. Why do we need to try to increase this revenue? I don't think they're against the increase in revenue, but most likely they are resistant because they are likely to be some kind of complexity. So when you are that good at what you do, in this case, this client of mine, then almost every complexity flows through you. Obviously, from our discussion, what we established was you got to step back a little bit and get to talk to these people, get to know what's their philosophy about growth and expansion. What have they done before? What has worked? Have a list of the things that have worked in the past, the things that according to them are not working, and then dream and think about and discuss about new ways on how to increase that revenue from this level to this level as well. So that takes time. It's a process, but it's a proven process. If you follow it, you are likely to get good results. So when complexity shows up, or at least it expands, then it's likely to flow to that particular person. And if you haven't been trained or you haven't allowed yourself to grow to become a leader who can look at complex situation, digest it a little bit, come up with digestible ways on how to present to the team, then you are likely to struggle. So whenever you have that one leader who we tend to call them heroes in the company or heroics, then the manager becomes the center of everything. And that's a lot of pressure for that particular leader. That's a disadvantage to the team. And that becomes also a bottleneck to the organization. So without realizing it, one of the organization's strongest leaders, in this case, this hero, becomes one of the biggest bottlenecks in the organization. So this is one of the most common leadership challenges I see in mostly growing organizations. The manager is not failing in this case. In fact, they are often performing exceptionally well. And that's why people get to come to them almost all the time, asking for questions and asking for help in terms of making decisions and anything else they need. So the problem is that they become what we call indispensable. And by the way, indispensable, it's figurative, and I think it's a made-up word, but it drives the point home. No one is indispensable. Everyone at some point cracks under pressure, and you don't want your leaders and your employees to ever crack under pressure, because if that happens, most likely your systems are not right. And again, all the pressure is likely to be flowing towards one person. So when a leader becomes indispensable in this context, the organization becomes dependent. And that's a dangerous thing. In sales, we say that you don't want to have either one customer or one client to be, I can't remember the numbers, but again, in my context, I don't want to have even 50% of my revenue coming from one client. And I love my clients, and we get to retain them for a long time, but you never know, anything can happen. The business can go down, or it can be bought by someone else, or we have an economic crunch. So you want to diversify the same way we diversify in business in terms of the clients that we have, and also in investments we want to diversify in terms of the employees that we have. So when you have just one employee that almost every single person depends on, then the organization becomes dependent, and it becomes very riskier for that organization. So let's talk about the hidden cost of being the hero. So let's say you, the leader, are the most indispensable person. You are the answer man and the answer woman. What's the cost? Many managers are promoted because they are excellent problem solvers. We already established that. They know the business and they understand the business. They know the customers. They understand the systems. They know how to get things done. And when a challenge appears, they step in, which is initially a sign of someone who's proactive. I remember when I got my very first management job, which was 3 months after college, and I was hired as an assistant production manager in a manufacturing company. One of the things our boss said was, you guys need to be proactive. You see something, you do something. Okay, come to me with the solutions, and that's a very good thing. And to an extent, you get trained to be the answer person, and it makes you feel good because we get to reward people. I reward people in my company when they take initiative, and especially if I see results. That's okay. But from a high level leadership perspective, you don't want to be the person that everyone depends on. People get to step in. When a decision needs to be made, again, they get to make it. When confusion arises within the team, they provide answers. And these behaviors, like I said, are often rewarded. And there's nothing wrong with that. The manager, from outside in, they look productive, and I've been there. The team is likely to get quick decisions being made or quick responses to their questions. The organization keeps moving because, again, we are moving towards somewhere, but there is a hidden cost, and it's hidden because it's not that obvious. If you walk into a an office space and things are happening, every employee is busy doing their thing, The leaders in their office just doing their thing as well, and nobody's yelling at each other. They look very happy. You are likely to have an illusion that everything is working, but the same leader who seems to be so cool, calm, and collected are likely to be crashing from inside. So there's always a hidden cost. This is how it gets cultivated. Every time a manager solves a problem that someone else in the team could have learned to solve the problem, they unintentionally and unconsciously reinforce dependency. The same dependency we are trying to shift from, the same dependency we don't want our organizations to suffer from. So, in other words, their team members learn to depend on the manager. And it's a learned thing, it's a learned habit. Now, we can't blame, or at least we shouldn't blame the team members when that happens, because who doesn't like quick results? Who doesn't like quick answers? Who doesn't like not having to work hard if there's an answer man and an answer woman where everything can flow up to them? So they learn to say, if I if I have a question, I need to ask the manager. If I have a problem, I take it to the manager. If a decision needs to be made or it feels risky, then let the manager decide. Which again, that's a whole training on its own, because if people are hesitating to make decisions, either they are not sure the power they have and the leeway they have in terms of the decisions they can make, or they have made decisions in the past which most likely backfired on them. Maybe they were blamed, or it cost the company a lot of money and they were told, never ever make any decision until you run it by me. Now, that's something that we get to hear that all the time, and probably it's not new to you. So the employees learn to depend on that manager. And over time, what happens, which I think is a big damage to the organization and even to the individuals, capability and creativity stop spreading across the board. I believe all of us have a part, have some level of creativity. We are born with it. We just need to cultivate that. So when people feel like they gotta go to the manager for everything, then their capability is going to stagnate or even slow down, and their imagination and their creativity is going to be affected. So that creates what we call the leadership bottleneck, which is again a very bad thing. Several years ago, I worked with an organization that had a highly respected leader, and that was about, I think, 8 years ago. She was intelligent, she was hardworking, and deeply committed to her team and to her profession and to the industry. Everyone viewed her and saw her as indispensable, as the most qualified and the most productive person and the most dependable person in the organization. Then something happened. She decided to take a 2 week vacation, which she had not done in 5 years. And that was a plus. Actually, I encouraged her to take a vacation. Within days, problems began to surface. She was in charge of a really high pressure, but also highly dependent department, so to say, in the organization. And we are talking about the departments where if it goes down, the organization is going down unless a miracle happens. And probably I don't see any miracle that can save an organization, especially if everything they sell flows through this particular department. Within days, several problems started to surface. Approvals that used to come to her desk were delayed. Obviously, she had assigned someone to do that, but hey, this is something they were not used to. So there was a little bit of a delay because they are still trying to learn the process, at least to make sure they don't make major mistakes. Decisions were not being made on time. Some projects were paused, and that was really bad for the organization. Employees repeatedly asked the same question, and that was, what should we do? The person who is the anchor for the team, the person who everything flows to, is not here. So what should we do? And they found themselves going to other departments and sometimes going to the president. And the president was like, I haven't done that thing in over 10 years. You guys have to figure it out. Not because the president didn't care, but literally they didn't know what to do. Because again, the company and the world has been going through changes pretty much every single year. The leader came back and they were able to definitely work longer hours to recover from potentially the damage that had happened. Nothing really major happened, but there was still some minor damages, the approvals and some decisions and production delays that were there. After going through all this experience, the organization discovered something that I think was very important. They discovered that the manager had built a high performing team, a team that knows what to do, when to do, how to do it, why it should be done. But she had not built an independent team. And again, I just mentioned the Multiplier Leader book that I published last month. That's the whole premise, where you want to build a team that can operate without you, team members that can think and make decisions, objective decisions, and profitable decisions without you being there. So she had not built an independent team. The team knew how to execute, but they did not know how to think and act on their own. That realization, I believe, changed everything for them. So instead of solving every problem herself, this particular leader, she began asking questions. And that was the beginning of her transformation as a leader. And if you care to know, she went on to become a senior VP. And at some point, she was the acting president. Then she left and went to work for another organization. But she has had a very successful career. So instead of providing answers, just as a result of what happened during that 2-week season, she gave them, the team members, an opportunity to propose a solution. That became her new thing. Instead of becoming the source of every solution, she became the builder of problem solvers. Over time, self-responsibility within the team and ownership increased, which is really a very beautiful thing. Decision making improved within the team. Confidence levels went up. And you and I know that confidence contributes really big time towards productivity, efficiency, people getting to enjoy what they do, employee engagement, and all the cool things we are all trying to build within our organization. If someone can have self-confidence in terms of what they do, but also in themselves, that has a far reaching benefit that they themselves get to draw from, the team gets to draw from, and the organization gets to draw from. The team became more capable and her department became less dependent on her, which is a big deal. That is the shift from being a manager to becoming a multiplier. So, what's the difference between managers and multipliers? Many leadership conversations focus on delegation, and I've been a part of all these. I started out, of course, as a manager. I became an executive. I became a training director for a major organization here in the US. I managed 32 engineers over several years. I got into business 12 years ago, and I have a very unique opportunity to be at the front row seat of organizations. We are talking about multi-billion dollar organizations, small companies as well. So I get to hear stories all across the board. So we get to have these discussions and these conversations about delegation and how to make the managers and the leaders more productive. And there's nothing wrong with that. But multiplication goes deeper than just delegation. Typical managers often transfer tasks and activities, but multipliers transfer capabilities and decision making. Managers focus on getting the work done. Again, there's value for that. Multipliers focus on developing people who can get the job done. Managers solve problems or they facilitate the process of solving problems. Multipliers build problem solvers. Managers increase output, multipliers increase capacity. And this distinction between managers and multipliers is very critical for you as a leader. If you're a senior manager or senior leader, or even if you are the manager to an extent who has been trained to just act as a traditional typical manager, this distinction is very critical to you. So because organizations rarely scale through effort, nobody is able to scale big time through effort. I was on a phone call earlier today with one of my team members, and we were talking about growth and the clients that are coming in, and we have marketing and we have the sales side and program development, and we are doing all kinds of stuff. And somehow we got into a marketing conversation because the lane she's leading. And one of the things I mentioned is that there's no way we can scale through physical effort. And we are talking about just doing one-on-one meetings and having these conversations. We can scale to an extent, but we can't unless we have hundreds and hundreds of people, and that increases complexity. So that means we got to find alternative ways to bring in leads and get to close the deals. So any organization, whether it's in terms of revenue or people or market share, you cannot scale through effort alone. And that's why you need to scale through capabilities. I I have someone that I highly respect, and actually, he is the one who introduced me to the true essence and aspect of coaching. And his name is Christian. And one of the things he taught me is that if you really want to grow an organization, you got to grow the leader, start with the leader, you grow the team, and then you grow the organization. Actually said you grow the leader, you grow the team, and the organization is going to grow as a result of that. And he said, if you confuse the order, or you decide to mix up the order, or somehow ignore the order, and either you start with the team or you try to grow the organization without developing the team members and the leader, then you are always going to struggle. That stuck with me. And he said that literally 10 years ago, 9.5 years ago. That was in 2016. It's true that you're only going to scale through capability. There are several shifts that you need to make to shift from being a manager to a multiplier. Shift number one is moving from answering to asking. I mentioned that, but I want to break it down. You move from answering questions or solving people's problems to actually asking questions. And that's a conversation I had with the leader that I just mentioned, the one who is in charge of these other senior leaders, basically leading the initiative of trying to grow the revenue per employee from a certain level to a certain level. So we had this discussion yesterday, and it was so interesting in a way. He said, I have a question for you. I just want to know what to do. And then he said, I think I know what you're going to tell me, but I'm going to ask anyway. And I was curious, and I said, okay, so before you ask the question, what do you think I'm going to tell you? And he said, I know you're going to tell me that I need to ask more questions instead of telling, and he went on and on. And he was right. I am a big proponent of asking questions before you jump into conclusions. And that's very valuable because you get to get the information. So most managers often feel the pressure to provide answers whenever someone asks a question. Multipliers, on the other side, ask questions. Instead of saying, here is what you should do, they ask questions like, what options are you considering? They'll ask questions like, what do you recommend? Even when you know the answer, by the way. And that's the hardest thing that my mentor Christian taught me, was when you are coaching someone, your job is not to tell them what to do, even when you know how to do it. Because when you tell them from the perspective of how you've done it before and how it has worked for you. But the biggest value is helping people to do what you call self-discovery. It's helping them to find their own answers. Obviously, you're going to help them with the frameworks. And if you need to teach something, you can teach, and then you ask questions. But that was the hardest thing for me, because I talk for a living, I teach for a living, I transfer information for a living. So it's, even with my team members, I got to slow down and ask questions to get to know where they're coming from. So these are some of the most beautiful and powerful questions you can ask. What options are you considering? What would you recommend? What risks do you see? That's really very valuable, especially if you're a senior leader. There's always a risk associated with that decision. There's always a risk associated with any answer that you give someone, because again, you're in a position of power. The goal is not for you to stop helping. The goal is to help the team and the team members develop independent thinking so they can act independently. So shift number one is to move from answering questions to asking questions. Shift number two is to move from solving to coaching. Solving to coaching. Most of the managers I've met and the ones I've got to interact with accidentally become what we call organizational firefighters. And this, to an extent, some kind of pride that we usually have. I used to be that manager, just so you know. I did management for 12 years. And again, I've been lucky enough that from a very young age, I became very resourceful. I could read books. I could pretty much anything that I came across. I asked questions. I did research. Library, even physical library. I still go to the library, became my friend. And even outside of work environment, I knew the person who sells cars, or who does oil change, or the person who's giving away stuff for free. So within my social circles, I was known. And to an extent, I'm still known as the guy that if you need something, just call them. They'll tell you. So I took pride in that, and that translated in my work as a manager, and it worked to an extent, but at some point it became a problem, until really my one of my bosses, who came to became one of my mentors and made a big difference in my career, called me on the side, and she said, every single time I come here, you're always busy. And I've seen you do what your team members are supposed to do. And I see them actually just standing around and looking around, which means they are not busy. and you are helping too much. That's what she said. She gave me a schedule. She said, early in the morning, come in and make sure everything is running smoothly. Step back to your office around 10 a.m. Look at your goals for the week and what's happening and look at some numbers. We used to get numbers pretty much every single day that we can look at. And she said, so that whenever I call you or I meet with you once a week, you have your numbers on your fingertips. And then she said, you can get back to work with your team members, walk around to catch them doing the right thing, and so you can recognize them. And then around 2 p.m., go back to the conference room or your office and lock the door and get to think about the day. She was telling me all kinds of stuff that they sounded good, but in my head, I'm like, man, I was hired to do the job. I like being hands-on. It didn't make sense at that point, but with the time, I saw the point and I tried it. I still struggled, but when I got it right, at some point, it felt so good. I was less stressed out. My team members were more productive. I think they felt that I was giving them a chance to grow. So most of the times, our mentors get to know more than we do. So the shift from solving problems to coaching. Again, most of the leaders accidentally become the firefighters, the people that are solving the problems. They solve issue after issue. The problem is that every solution creates another dependency, the thing we are trying to run away from. On the contrary, multipliers coach their employees through a problem-solving process. Just so you know, there's almost a framework and a process for everything and anything to do. We build frameworks on leadership and business systems, so I know. And yes, I like to think in terms of frameworks because frameworks bring to the surface and into your circle a, so to say, predictable ways on how to do things. It's more like a recipe. Multipliers get to walk their team members through potentially a problem solving process. The development and training process may take longer when you decide to slow down to train your people and also to coach them on any process, basically any framework on how to do something. But the long-term benefits are unquestionable. And that's something you can trust me on. Okay. Shift number 3 is moving from delegating tasks to delegating decisions. I already mentioned about this. Let me break it down. Delegation alone does not create ownership. Actually, again, going back to the Multiplier book that I wrote, there are 2 chapters there on delegation. The first one talks about delegation philosophy, and the second one is delegation blueprint. The very first book that I wrote in 2022 also talks about delegation, and we teach about that because it's such a powerful concept, not just a concept, but a practical way to scale your team and get to step back and buy back your time. So delegation alone does not create ownership, but managers tend to delegate work while retaining every meaningful decision, while retaining control. They say, hey, I'm going to delegate this, do it. But before you ship it, before you distribute it, you need to run it by me. Now, there's value in that. I do the same thing. But if I do that, that person is going through a delegation training process. It's not random, it's not haphazard. And it gets to a point where I trust them enough and say, hey, go take care of this coaching client. That's your client. I don't even need to know what's going on. Now, I need to know, but it's going to be every 3 months. I don't need to know every single day the discussion that you had because they have gone through the process. If someone is working on a project, we might work together, but I'm teaching them on how to do it so they can stand on their own. That's good for me, and it's good for them, and it's good for my company. Whenever you delegate a task and then you still keep control, the employee is likely to complete the task, but you are still, again, owning the decision. And to an extent, they are not growing. They'll be doing the same thing. They become experts at managing the tasks. That's not good for you, and it's not good for them. On the flip side, multipliers transfer decision-making responsibility over time. And I just explained that to you. They help employees develop the ability to make objective judgment calls. And the key word is objective. Now, I'm in business and there are risks involved when it comes to delegating tasks. But when you have a process, and let me back up a little bit, when your team members know that there are some things that mean a lot to you, there are things that you are very particular about, and then you get to a point where you decide to delegate, they get to appreciate that. And the goal is not for them to praise you or worship you. No, that's not the point. There are specific things all of us are very particular about. For me, something that all my team members know. I'm very particular about how people are treated, not just my team members. Now, I'm particular about that within my company. So I have to hold myself accountable, which means I got to apologize to my employees sometimes when I mess up something. But I'm very particular when it comes to everyone else out there, whether someone is a client or not. And in particular, the clients that we get to serve, because they are an extension of our family at Dynamo Methods. So that means any interaction, any conversation, any potentially attitude that's being projected out there, I'm very particular about that. And that means I may not care much if someone messes up something within my company that we can resolve within. If it's something to do with a client or anyone else out there who is not a client, I'm likely to lose it. I know myself. I'm very particular about that. So I can't just give away some of the things that I'm very particular about. I'm particular about quality. If there's any program that we are going to release, including any kind of, and I'm just going to show you something here. I have this is a workbook. This is a workbook for one of my programs. It's based on the very first book that I wrote, which is Now That I'm a Manager, What Do I Do Next? And this is a workbook for a 2-day workshop. We went through the process of refining the workbook with my program director, and it took us really weeks and weeks. We put it together, and then I decided to print a sample to see how it looks like. Now, the workbook is good to go. It can be used, but what I saw were a few kind of font stuff that are a little bit faded. You can still read them, but they're not that good. And we discussed actually just this weekend. We said, okay, we are going to use this internally, but we are going to revise the workbook and get to print extra copies for our workshop. So now that's something I'm very particular about. Do I have to be involved in every step? No. But when it comes to approving before it gets shipped out there, I'm going to be involved until someone in my team is able to look at it with the same lens. And I can tell you a story after story when it comes to creating those recipes to make sure things are being done the same way. As a result of that workbook, by the way, I came up with a what we call asset production standard. And that is, how do we create the workbooks? How do you create the facilitator workbook? How do you create the slides? How do we create the run sheets? And then we have a checklist, a quality control checklist. So there's a process of creating then a quality control checklist. And whenever that's done, someone has to sign off to say this is good to go. So there is a predictable process. Yes, it takes longer than it should for a typical manager, but we create it once, and all we need to do is to maintain that. So this is not to impress you, but just to let you know that when you have a process, it becomes very easy. And that means when I travel or I just decide to step back and spend time with my 2 kids, then I don't have to freak out because my team knows what they're doing. So if you've never tried it, I challenge you to try it. You never go back because it's a beautiful thing. So multipliers transfer decision making responsibility over time, and they get to help employees, like I said, to develop the ability to make objective judgment calls. And judgment, being able to have good judgment, is what increases leadership capacity. So again, we are trying not to increase effort. Nobody wants to work longer hours. Nobody wants to work harder than they should. We want to increase capacity by developing skills and having systems in place. All right, shift number 4 that you need to make to move from being a typical manager to becoming a multiplier is moving from personal performance to organizational capacity. Again, this is something that I'm very passionate about. We talk about when it comes to organizational growth, there are different levels. We have leadership operating systems. So there are 4 different systems that every company gets to utilize, whether they know it or not. So we have internal operating system, and that focuses on the person, on the leader, on the employee. And that's about their confidence, knowing what they need to do. And when they do that, they become what you call stabilizers, which means they can get the job done. The next level is called relational system. That means they can connect with people from different departments. They are very personable. They know how to do the job. Their people are loyal to them. They are probably involved 20 or 30% of the time doing the actual work, but they have people that are working with them. That's on the relational side, which means you got to hone your communication skills. You got to hone your connection skills. You got to hone your feedback giving skills, all those things that we get to do at work. And you got to be very relatable. You got to be personable in a way. You got to be able to forgive people for stuff, not to let them get away with things, but you got to learn to let go. You can just be holding on to stuff all the time. That's going to work against you. So that's the second level. The next level is organizational leadership system. And that's when organizations now focus on building systems within the organization on how to do things, why they need to be done, having recipes so that each department has its own recipe and there's a general recipe for the whole organization. So if you talk to the department head from accounting, they are going to speak the same language with someone from operations, and not in terms of the details, but they know where we are going. They know the philosophy, they know the company values, they know what we stand for, they know what we are focusing on. That's the organizational operating system. And then on the highest level, that's the multiplication operating system, where whether you're a senior leader or not, you're focusing on developing other leaders so they can develop other leaders as well. And there's a chapter in the book, The Multiplier Leader, which is called Leaders Leading Leaders, where you develop leaders that are going to lead other leaders, and that's how you become a multiplier, which is a beautiful thing. So you want to move from personal performance to organizational capacity, and most managers often measure success by what they accomplish. Again, there's a place for that, but multipliers measure success by what others accomplish. They measure their success based on what they accomplish through others. The question changes from what did I get done? That's the question that a typical manager asks. What did I get done? And it shifts to what capability did I build within my team? And that is how leadership capacity expands throughout the organization. So those are the four shifts that you need to make to move from being a typical manager to being a multiplier. So you need to shift from answering questions to asking questions. The second shift is moving from solving problems to coaching on how to solve problems. The third shift is moving from delegating tasks to delegating decisions so you can increase ownership. And the fourth shift is moving from personal performance to organizational capacity. So why does this matter to you today? Okay. And I think I mentioned in the beginning, whether we like it or not, these are things we're experiencing, and we're going to continue experiencing this every single day. You don't have to get online or read a newspaper. If you still do, I think you can do that online, for you to know that the world is changing really fast and you need to have up-to-date information. Yes, you can read, but I do both. But I have personally, and I believe all the people in my space, we have a very unique opportunity and privilege of having these conversations. We get to talk to new managers and emerging leaders and senior leaders, business owners, the CEOs. We get to know what they're worried about. And more than ever before, besides something like AI, which is a system, by the way, it's a tool for a system that you can use. That's not the only thing, but the biggest worry is on the human capital. They are worried, are my people going to be able to keep up? Are my people going to respond positively to the changes that I'm going to propose? We have actually a program that we are working on, and we had a conversation yesterday with my program director, and I believe we are going to keep the title, but so far the title is called Change Without Chaos. And our goal is to help leaders and business owners on how to facilitate change without causing any chaos, without slowing down efficiency, without really getting distracted from doing the normal things that you're supposed to do, including the small stuff. So this matters more than ever before because it's relevant. So as we speak today, like I said, many organizations are struggling with leadership capacity. Leaders are overwhelmed. Managers are overloaded. Employees feel uncertain about the present and the future. And this is a day to day thing. And that's bad for the team member because stress is not a good thing. It's bad for the organization because the team members are likely to be distracted. It's bad for the leader like you because you may not even have all the information about the changes to come. And you can't even guarantee that if we solve one problem today or you answer a question today about the changes, there's no guarantee tomorrow you're not going to have another change because the world is moving. And we are not asking people to ignore the change. We are just asking them to be open-minded and let themselves be trained and coached to learn how to navigate change, even at a fast pace. So that's really going to be valuable to you. So whenever there's a major change or something is happening, when leaders are overwhelmed and when managers are overloaded, when employees are uncertain, the instinctive response is often organizations or even their leaders saying, we need stronger managers. We need better managers. Again, we get to hear this all the time. But the real need, and this is my case now, I'm building a case for this. The real need may not be stronger managers. The real need may be you need more multipliers. You need more multiplier minded leaders. You need people that can build capacity, people that can let themselves grow from the internal operating system that we talked about, people that are willing to grow and become relationally savvy, be able to connect with other people from different departments, and they don't have to depend on their boss. People that are willing to read books and show up to a training like this. Maybe that's what you need. And I'm convinced that's what my company needs. I believe that's what the world needs. But hey, I would like to know your take, because strong managers create results. We already established that. Multipliers create more leaders, and organizations grow faster when leadership capacity spreads across the board. Here is a simple question for senior leaders. If a key manager took a 2-week vacation with no way of contacting them, what would happen? What's likely to happen within their department? Would the team members continue making decisions the right way? Would projects continue moving forward? Would ownership remain strong? Or would everything stop until the manager returns? The answer may reveal whether the leader is multiplying capacity or whether the leader is reinforcing dependency. As I conclude this training today, one of the greatest compliments we can receive is not people saying that we can't do this without you. The best compliment a leader can and should desire and strive for is people saying, you helped us to learn how to do this ourselves, and you can trust us that we are going to deliver results with or without you being in the space. Now, as a leader, assuming that your ego and your identity is not wrapped around the accolades and the praise and being told you are the best. And if that's the case, we need to have another discussion. You gotta grow yourself out of that, because that's not gonna help you. But assuming that your identity is not wrapped around those accolades and the praises, when you hear that statement, when people say you helped us learn how to do what we are supposed to do every single day, and you can trust us to deliver results with or without you, that's one of the best compliments. But I hope all of us have a desire to get there. So one thing for all of us to remember is this: as we get done with this training, your success as a leader is not measured by how many people depend on you. Let me say it again. Your success as a leader is not measured by how many people depend on you. Your success is measured by how many people become more capable because of you. And your best leader, the one who delivers results, can quietly become the bottleneck that's going to stand between you and the growth that you desire. But your best multiplier can become the catalyst that unlocks leadership capacity throughout the entire organization. And that is the difference between managing work and multiplying people. So that's it. That's all I got for you. And as always, let me just say that I believe in you. I may not know who you are and what you do. We may not even ever meet in person. And if we meet, that's great. But one thing I know, even if we've never met, is that what you do matters. What you do makes a difference. What you do makes an impact. And I know you are going to continue doing what you're doing for the time that you decide to do it. And even if it gets tough, you have mentors within your organization. And if you are top of the top leader, most likely you have a mentor. And if you don't and you need some help, obviously reach out to us. And if you're not able to help you, we know people that can help you. So until next time, keep multiplying people, keep multiplying your purpose, and keep multiplying your impact. We'll see you in the next training.